Well, good afternoon, and thank you for giving me this opportunity. Can you hear me okay, Raghav? Okay, very good. Well, thank you for having me, and congratulations on having such a good turnout at such an important conference. I'm going to discuss the topic of moving from monopoly to competition and ask the question, after 40 years of effort, what lessons have we learned? I'm going to focus on the United States experience because I don't think it has aspects that are so unique that you can't use them in India. I'm going to address four major topics. First, I want to stress that preparing to convert a historically monopolistic industry requires a logical sequence of thinking and actions. Secondly, when you actually convert the industry, that requires a distinct logical sequence. Thirdly, I'm going to discuss briefly our experience in telecom, wholesale generation, and retail electricity to show you what we have done right and done wrong here in the United States. And then I want to discuss some features of the new field of behavioral economics, which can teach us something about how to correct some mental biases that are making it difficult to implement competition. Now, Raghav, can you hear me okay so far? Okay, then let's start. When we prepare to convert an industry from a monopolistic history to a competitive future, there's a logical sequence. It may seem strange, but we have to start by defining the purpose of regulation. The purpose of regulation is performance, the performance of the industry that we're trying to regulate. We need to focus not just on the incumbent and its financial health, we need to focus on the economic efficiency and the technological reliability of the industry itself. Now, we induce performance by ensuring that the behavior of each of the players in the market is consistent with economic efficiency, with reliability, and with the range of products and services that customers want. You have to start by asking, what do customers want? What does industrial development want? What does the economy want? We have to then decide what types of players will produce the products and services that we need. We have to decide what is the conduct of those players that will produce that performance. And we have to decide what is the market structure that will attract the type of players and induce the type of conduct that will produce the performance that we want. Those three things, structure, conduct, and performance, structure, conduct, and performance, are the ingredients for a successful transition from a monopoly market to a competitive market. I stress this because so many policymakers want to skip the analysis and move to their fantasies. They fantasize about competition, they pray for competition, but they don't analyze the features of structure, conduct, and performance so that they can arrange competition to produce the results they desire. Now, another feature that we've often omitted in the United States is to define the public interest that we're trying to pursue. We have to ask, what is the mix of services that we desire? What are the standards for providing those services? What type of quality, cost, safety, innovation, environmental compatibility, service territory preparation, the things that we need to prepare for to achieve those objectives. What is the level of performance that we want? Do we want excellence? Do we want medium performance? Do we want poor but adequate performance? If we fail to define those standards, we're unable to achieve them. Then we have to ask the question, to induce the necessary performance, who are the appropriate actors? Do we want government providers? Do we want private providers? Do we want private-public partnerships? What are the types of companies? Do we want just domestic companies? Do we want international companies? How do we want them financed? Do we want them financed through publicly issued securities? Do we want them financed through private equity buyouts? Do we want family companies? Do we want other types of companies? Failing to identify the types of investors, types of companies, the types of conduct leads to a result which will vary from what we're hoping for. We also want to ask the question, then, market structures. Competition works when we have a market structure with a sufficient number of viable providers who have access to the essential facilities, access to financing, access to customer data, access to all the things necessary to succeed. There are some services that still require a monopoly function. You don't want to have multiple air traffic controllers at the airport. You want to have a single air traffic controller, and you don't want that air traffic controller controlling one of the airlines. You have to have independence of the monopoly function from the competitive function. In our country, we still struggle with this. I learned years ago from one of my mentors that everybody wants competition and every competitor wants to be a monopoly. And so, because every competitor wants to be a monopoly, there have to be protections against enabling monopolies to be competitors at the same time. That's been the most significant flaw in our country in electricity, in gas, in telecommunications, is to allow the provider of the monopoly service also to provide the competitive service. Now, once we have figured out what are the products and services that we want, once we have figured out what type of conduct will produce those products and services, once we have figured out what types of companies and what types of market structures will most likely produce those products and services cost effectively, then we have to ask the question, what are the types of regulation that are necessary to produce all of those topics? I tell my students not to use the word deregulation because it has no clear definition. There is no way to bring competition into a historically monopolistic market without some form of regulation, some form of regulation about market structure, about corporate structure, about financing, about quality of service. There will always be a need for some form of regulation. We don't want to overregulate. We need to identify what are the types of private behaviors that unregulated will be contrary to the public interest. Then we need to fashion the forms of regulation to address those behaviors. Regulation should be no more nor no less than necessary to align those private behaviors with the public interest. Well, Raghav, let me pause and see if there are any questions before I turn to some topics relating to our transition in the United States. Raghav, back to you.